folks, and welcome back. My name is Kevin Darty, and I'm with the Illinois Agriculture in the Classroom program, and we're happy to have you today joining us as we are welcoming you to the 2020 National Excellence in Teaching About Agricultural Award Recognition Ceremony. Before we get started, let's go over the order of events and a few instructions. I hope you've had a chance to watch the video of today's National Teacher Award winner, Ryan Ferre, and his ag literacy efforts that have been posted to Facebook on the National Ag in the Classroom Facebook site, as well as the National Ag in the Classroom website, agclassroom.org. Mr. Ferre and his state contact from Utah, Denise Stewardson, will be given a few minutes to share and speak about the ag literacy efforts in Mr. Ferre's classroom. After that, we'll open it up to questions. And if you would just please type your questions into the Facebook Live chat box. We're recognizing our national teacher winners a little differently because of the social distancing issues and canceling our conference in Salt Lake City, Utah. But we did not want to cancel the conference. We did not want the cancellation of the conference to diminish the recognition of our 2020 National Excellence in Teaching About Agricultural Award-winning teachers. These teachers, including Mr. Ferre, have worked diligently throughout this school year and many others to incorporate ag concepts into their classroom and to educate students about the importance of agriculture in their daily lives. We've recognized all 8. This is our final one, but we will have recognized all 8 of our National Teacher Award winners, as well as our Ag Advocate Volunteer Award winner this June using Facebook Live, just like we're doing today. Please visit the National Ag in the Classroom website at agclassroom.org to see the posts of these. And you can join in on the recordings of the Zoom calls, the Facebook Live calls there. We would not be able to hold this without the support of our sponsors, the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute on Food and Agriculture. We fondly refer to that as USDA NIFA. And our fine friends at Farm Credit. We thank them both very much, the USDA NIFA and Farm Credit, for sponsoring the awards today. And today, like I said, we're recognizing Ryan Ferre, a 5th grade math, science, language, social studies, art, and health teacher at Saratoga Shores Elementary in Saratoga Springs, Utah, who uses a pumpkin growing contest, development of different cultivars of flowers, embryology, and hydroponics to teach his students the important STEM concepts. So we welcome right now Mr. Ferre and Mr. Ryan Ferre and Utah State Ag in the Classroom contact Denise Stewardson. Well, to begin with, Mr. Ferre, Ryan, would you please show us where Saratoga Springs is located in Utah? Kind of put the lay of the land there for us.
Yeah, so we're about, I would say 20 to 30 minutes south of Salt Lake. And the school itself is situated pretty close to Utah Lake. In fact, my classroom windows have an enormous view of that lake. So when the sun rises in the morning, you just stand and watch that reflection hit our ceiling. It's really kind of cool.
Well, very cool, very cool. And explain some of the ideas that you've done for people who might not have seen the video. I highly encourage them to go out there and look at that. But let's start with even before your students come into your classroom, talk about the pumpkin growing contest that you've established.
Yeah, so I gave my students some pumpkin seeds at the very end of the school year before my school year with them would begin. So I teach 5th grade, so they got it at the end of their 4th grade year. And my idea is to create something that they could have the entire summer to investigate what goes on with growing pumpkins. And that could include anything from I planted the seeds and they totally died, or, you know, maybe I live in an apartment complex and I don't even have a garden space. They could maybe plant it in a pot. I wanted them to see how various different environments can affect the pumpkins. But my main goal is I wanted the class to have one thing that we could all come together and talk about and experience the different things, such as pests. I created a photo contest where they could take pictures of like the pest if they started to get eaten by bugs. And that makes it so that way there's a good level playing field for all the students to kind of enter the classroom on day one and really have something to start talking about.
Well, what is the climate like in Saratoga Springs? So with the lake, is the end of May, beginning of June, is that the right time to be planting pumpkins, or is it too early, too late?
So around here, a lot of people say you can plant around Mother's Day. And so getting seeds the very end of the school year, that's about 2 weeks behind what the normal schedule for our area would be.
It's been really interesting. Some of these sessions I've hosted with our other teachers to hear the person from New Mexico and Maine talk about different climate. We're one big country, but it's amazing how things are different across the board. Why don't you expand on that? Your background in the nursery business. In the video, it talks about as you were going to school, you actually worked in a nursery as well. So what kind of spurred on your interest in agriculture and students?
So I actually graduated in horticulture from Utah State University, and I loved that. In fact, my dream was to work in a greenhouse, so I did that. But well, guess what happened in my own garden in June, July, and August? I was too busy. And so this opportunity came to me to start teaching. And so I actually started teaching at the same time I was working in a greenhouse. And eventually the teaching job overtook the greenhouse job. And so it's been really fun. So I could see how I could integrate those skills with my background can be applied in a regular elementary classroom.
Very interesting. And obviously more in-depth background when you talk about your hydroponics and your hybrid flower systems. Actually, why don't you share with folks about your students and what they do with their hybrid flower systems?
So over the years, we've bred several different things in my classroom, and I think I finally hit the gold potluck, and that is with mimulus. It is a very fast-growing flower. In fact, we've had blooming plants from seed in only 31 days, and having something so fast that the kids get to do is so much fun because they literally get to create something. And the reason for doing that is that in order to get students to understand the concepts that is in our core, I like to find something that's interesting that gives them a hands-on perspective. And in Utah, the previous science corps mentioned that offspring of plants should look like their parents. And so I thought, well, let's just put that to the test right away. And so we did that. But what was super interesting about the mimulus is not only did we just do that in the classroom, we reached out to the breeder who is actually in England, and we were able to see their greenhouses, see their growing systems, and compare kind of what they did to what we're doing in our own classroom. And that really helped us to really expand our own knowledge of not just how are we growing these under fluorescent lights in a classroom, but how these plants look different, grow different in a greenhouse, and how our goals of mainly flower colors and scent are very different than the breeder's goals of having a nice full bloom bedding plan. And so it's kind of fun to see the differences.
Well, and then let's take that on to another project that you're involved with, and that's your hydroponic system. Why don't you explain a little bit about the student involvement with that as well?
Yeah, so when you go into the store and buy a fertilizer, they often have a recommendation of how much fertilizer to add to it. And so I always look for what is my curriculum tie? What is it my students need to learn this year? And so mathematics really pulled into that. And so I found a way to bring in the math so my students could calculate how much of the nitrogen that my plants needed in the classroom. And so by doing so, the students were able to use their fraction skills and their multiplication and division skills to really find out how much fertilizer to add. And we extended that a little bit farther by talking about the importance in the industry about we don't want to apply more fertilizer than is necessary, not only because it's a waste of money, but it also can damage our environment.
Right. Well, earlier today, I talked with our award-winning teacher from Virginia, and she talked about how she was staying one step ahead of her students. She learned about hydroponics and started this. Here you are, a hort major. You worked at a greenhouse. That's kind of unfair. Why don't you share with our teachers out there what have you learned too, and what are some of those stories and how you can encourage them to get involved even if they don't have a hort background?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to be totally honest with that question. So I do remember learning about the amount of nitrogen plants need when I was actually in those classes at the University of Utah. However, I did have to go back in time and say, okay, it's time to pull out those old books and start rereading, because what I was looking for is that math. I wanted to find the math that could apply to my students. And so I did have to go back in time and basically reteach myself and then figure out where is it that the concepts are that my students can understand that's grade level appropriate, how much of the background knowledge do I need to do first in order to really present it to them in a way where not only does it stay fun for them, because I don't want to give them a very difficult problem and they don't have the skill set to do it. So you really do have to go and investigate for yourself, thinking of the age group that you're teaching, because then you can say, oh, I need to teach this first and this second, and that clearly defined goal needs to be part of that decision-making process.
And I think that the success in being able to see something in 31 days in a month, those fifth graders, that's almost a long-term goal there, a whole month at a time, you know. So fortunately, it's the growing season is short enough. But let's take it another direction. Another project that you and your students are involved in, a little bit of animal agriculture, and you take a slightly different spin on typical chick hatching. Why don't you explain your quail hatchings?
Yeah, so I always am looking for that next opportunity to get the students to read. And what better opportunity to say, hey, do you guys want to hatch some chicks? And of course, students are going to say, yeah, I want to. But the moment you start showing them information about how to successfully hatch an egg, they realize that it's not just as simple as you put it in an incubator and it hatches. And so the reason why I did that project is I wanted to provide them literature that they could read that really takes them into some advanced knowledge about the incubation process, particularly in terms of humidity, which is a very difficult thing to control in a lot of the cheaper incubators. And in a classroom, oftentimes teachers don't have that money set aside to buy a nice expensive incubator to watch the chicks hatch. And so I wanted to present this problem to my students of saying, let's hatch some eggs, but we want to do it the right way. And so by really letting them figure out how to create an incubator, adjust the humidity appropriately, weighing the eggs so they get a 13% weight loss. All again, this is tying back to the math curriculum, not only that science curriculum, but I'm really throwing in the language arts in there heavily. But if you were to say, what are we doing today? They're saying, well, we're working our incubator. But if you ask me, what are they doing? Well, I have my whole skill set. Well, they're doing language arts, they're doing math, they're doing some history in this sometimes, and science. And it's really that STEM education that is being brought to the forefront.
And why quail instead of traditional chicken eggs?
Yeah, so in order to hatch something, they need to have a home. And so the quail, I knew I could find a home for them. That would be right here, what I call our Ferre farm. So I knew that I could bring them home, and that's why we chose quail.
I gotcha. Now, one other thing, I'm a book guy. I'm a big book guy. Any popular books that you recommend, literature that from the children's literature's perspective that your students engage in, either in your hybrid flowers, your plant science units, or your animal science units?
Yeah, so I have a great book. I think it's just called Gregor Mendel, and it's actually a picture book, and it talks about the genetics that Gregor Mendel worked with, and also Chickens Grow Teeth is another great one. And that really ties in that process of someone really wanting to raise chicks from an egg. And so those are two of my really top big ones. But another book that doesn't necessarily have an agriculture tie, but it really does bring together of this idea of we need to work together and solve these different problems that we use is called Operation Yes. And I would say that really starts in about 5th grade and upper. And it's mainly just about people working together.
Oh, very good. So life skills all across the board. You see that in agriculture, you see that in education, all across the board. There's certainly been some aha moments that I'm sure in your video you talk about one of your former students writing a college application and writing to you about that. But a question from the chat panel says, describe an aha moment you've seen with your students.
You know, there's tons of aha moments, but the ones that really come to my mind are the ones that 3 or 4 years after you've taught these students, they're coming back and saying, I still remember when. And I think that is very important with education, especially with younger education, is that they can know that learning is fun and learning can be lifelong.
Right. And in the video, it talks about this student who's writing writes back to you as he's applying for college, talking about how he determined at that point in time he was going to make something of himself. So definitely a credit to you. So Ryan, can you tell us how lessons you do with the students might change if your school needs to return virtually? I think that's a great question for all of our teachers, because you just finished the school year virtually. Oh man, what do we do if we have to start virtually?
So to answer your question, I mean, I think that is actually a really interesting dynamic that we have now. And anytime that we're really trying to get students involved, it's that problem solving learning. So now we have a new problem. Well, what if we do have to leave the school for 2 weeks? If that is the case, can the incubator take care of itself for 2 weeks? Can the hydroponic system take care of itself for 2 weeks? And so that just adds that extra little layer that now we can address with the students, and it just takes them to that next level.
Right. And, another chat question here talks about they love the flower pollinating classroom experience, specifically with those quick breeding flowers. How about ideas for future classroom projects or experiments that you might have?
So I'm always thinking of that next thing, not only just to freshen it up for me so I don't have to do the same thing over and over every year, but for future, my brain's already rolling into this next 2020 or 2021 year. And so my future idea is water lilies. Something that I think many would probably say, what? Water lilies in the classroom? But I think there's going to be a lot of application there, especially since in the new science curriculum that a lot of states are going towards, it talks about systems. And so the whole systems in place can really be pulled in with a system that's in water.
And describe for your, when I think of Utah, I think of more high plains. I've got this, the pioneers coming across. That's the image I have. But you said you're located between Salt Lake and then Utah Lake. What is the terrain like for water lilies? And what about the background of your students? What's their socioeconomic? What kind of is the makeup of the community there?
Yeah, so it's a high desert here. And so, right around the lake, you get rushes and reeds, but away from that, you're going to have more of your sagebrush and junipers. So in terms of water lilies, yes, we have water lilies that grow natively here, but they're, about an hour and a half drive up into our high Uinta Mountains. And so this is something that a lot of, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that plant itself, even from adults who think that, it's just a pad that floats. And so I think there's a lot of learning that can be involved there. And where it's going to get exciting is I want the students to take their information home. So if you're talking about water lilies, they're going to be taking this home to parents, teaching their parents interesting things. So when you talk about those the social economic things, I think it's very critical to really level that playing field of giving them something that maybe parents are going to be learning from their students now, because it is something that not a lot of people are familiar with in the area.
Right, and with your connection there with Utah State University and the Ag in the Classroom program, obviously you have a more in-depth knowledge of agriculture, but then applying it to your classroom. Can you share some of the activities or experiences you've had with Utah Ag in the Classroom that you could share, or National Ag in the Classroom that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, so I always love to look at what other people are doing. And I think that is what gets my brain spinning and saying, oh, I hadn't thought about doing that before. And I think those Ag in the Classroom resources have been so critical for me to open up and say, okay, well, that looks fun, but what's my curriculum tie? And then when I start to see that curriculum tie, it really starts to broaden my horizons of what I can do next. And so I love going to those resources to see what others are doing. If the only thing I get from that is getting my next idea rolling, because I think any lesson that you see out there that someone else has created, you have to make it your own. And when you start to make it your own, it's not only fun, but the kids start to see that you're into it.
Right. In Illinois, we call that R&D. Rip off and duplicate. Make it your own, but rip off and duplicate. Exactly. There is no original idea. Somebody else had it as well.
That's right.
That's right. We'll bring on Denise Stewartson, the Utah Ag in the Classroom contact. Denise, go ahead and unmute yourself. And you can obviously see the excitement and enthusiasm that Ryan brings to his classroom. Why don't you share a few words about Ryan and his role within Utah?
So we like to call Ryan like our hidden gem. And I think that's true of many of our teachers. I think many state state programs are finding that. We have teachers out there that are doing amazing things. And, you know, Judy Culbertson talked about this last week when she was with her Teacher of the Year. You know, we put out applications for Utah Excellence in Teaching About Agriculture Award. And this year we got no applications. And I'm like, this cannot be true. Like, I know there are teachers out there teaching about agricultural literacy, the importance of agriculture in our students' daily lives. I know they're out there, but we've got to find them. But I think Judy, she hit the nail on the head when she said, these teachers are doing amazing work, but they don't want to talk about themselves. They'll talk about their students, but they're not going to say, oh, now I'm going to self-nominate for this award. So we're like, we know they're there. So we dug into our classroom grant applications. We've been doing classroom grants for several years. And I've read through those reports that teachers had sent in, and I read Ryan, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I never met Ryan. I'm like, this gentleman is doing amazing things in his classroom. So I called him and I just had a chat with him about all that he was doing with his, you know, his quail hatching and the science and engineering work that he's doing with his students, the cultivars, you know, the plant breeding, the pumpkin contest, the hydroponics, all that he had involved in his classroom, and making it very interdisciplinary. And I said, well, thanks, Ryan, for the update. I hung up, I went to my team and I said, this teacher's amazing. And so we said, he's our guy. So I called him back and I said, Ryan, we've selected you to be our Utah Excellence in Teaching About Agriculture Award. He's like, no way, that can't be true. And so I hope that teachers who are listening out there really understand that we need you to tell your story, because like Ryan said, you know, when you get ideas from someone else, and every teacher who's been on these Facebook Live recordings have said, when we get ideas from other teachers, it just spurs passion and motivation and energy in our own classrooms. And so I'm really hoping that this will encourage other teachers. And another thing I think about Ryan, it's so amazing. Now, we've watched a lot of these videos, and we saw, you know, the teacher in Kansas who had this giant barn, I mean, and herds of animals, you know, and acres of crops. And then we saw giant greenhouses, and the people in Maine, they're tapping maple trees for maple syrup. We don't, you know, I don't think Ryan has that in his backyard or in his classroom. But what I think is awesome about Ryan is that he takes these agricultural literacy concepts and integrates them in an interdisciplinary fashion. As he said, he's teaching math and science and art and literature, and doing that on a daily basis in a very integral way, not just a kind of a cursory, oh, today let's talk about a flower, tomorrow let's talk about quail eggs. But he's doing it every single day. And so I hope that this is a motivation for other teachers who say, I don't have a greenhouse, or I don't have a chicken coop in the, you know, on the school, in the schoolyard. But Ryan has just done amazing work with his students. And I think we see that in, as Kevin, you alluded to, there's a part in the video about, you know, a former student who came in and talked to Ryan and said, you know, Mr. Ferre, I decided that after I was in your class, you made me better, right? I decided I wanted to make myself better. And I'm gonna get teary, but that's the kind of teacher that we want. And he's used agriculture to do that with his students. And so I think he's just a great example for other teachers who are looking to use resources. So, you know, use your state program resources with agriculture in the classroom. I'm so excited we get to take Ryan, and I'm sad that we didn't have our conference in Salt Lake City. I mean, my team and I were really sad about that. This is going to be our big party in 2020, and it's not going to happen. But we're going to take Ryan to Des Moines with us, and he'll get to experience, I think, your first, right, Ryan, your first National Agriculture in the Classroom.
Yeah, so as much as I don't like 2020, I'm excited to actually get to go see another state. So that'd be cool.
I know.
I will let you know, Iowa's a lot like Illinois. You'll find corn on the left and beans on the right. So be a little different. We promise heat and humidity in the Midwest next summer. So I can make that assumption right now. So
that's true.
Ryan, I'm just going to tell you, you made your state contact cry. Now would be a good time to get on the line and fill out a grant application for the Utah Ag in the Classroom Teacher Grant Program. And no school is rolling in the money. Can you talk a little bit about what you might have used that grant for, or other grants and other ways that you've found ways to make your students' education more valuable?
Yeah, so the grants has always been an important part of what happens in my classroom. People come in and they're like, how did you get money for that? Well, you have to go out and you have to look for that money. So when I did get the agriculture in the classroom grant from Utah, I used that to purchase a lighting system in my classroom, because with plants, lights are very critical and important. And so we actually purchased different types of lights, LED lights, fluorescent lights. And so that way the students can really start to see the difference. Does that answer your question?
There you go. Right. Yeah. So other grant or other places you've looked for money?
Yeah, so Donors Choose, I use Donors Choose quite frequently, and one of my goals is to really increase my business and community outreach, and so that way when the students have a purpose because a business is interested in our classroom now, I think that will enhance the opportunities that they have.
I totally agree with you there. So how about one of you, if you had to pick just one, what do you think your greatest success has been in the classroom?
In terms of project?
You pick. So
I think my greatest success is just to see and talk to my students years down the road, and they still remember what they did in our class, and they're still excited about those things.
That's right. Whether it's agriculture, whether it's reading, at the end of the day, you are a classroom teacher. So that's true. How about ideas that you would like to see developed across the grade levels? How might your fellow teachers utilize Ag in the Classroom resources there in Saratoga Springs?
Yeah, so I've actually been putting together how different projects can actually match the different grade levels. One of the projects that I don't know if it can happen or if it will happen, but it's my hope that it can happen, is the site of our school is a hill. It's a pretty steep hill, so we really don't let the students up on the hill. And right now it's just our native sagebrush. And so I thought it'd be fun to try to pull together plants that bloom about the same time, red, white, blue, maybe create a nice giant blooming flag up there, but something that brings in those native plants that will give students the ability to really care for the rest of the school grounds. I mean, it's not an eyesore, it's pretty, it's a pretty hill, but it just gives them something else to do to really take care of our own school environment, but it would be, you know, cross-curricular in terms of grade levels. And so I have looked at that. There's hiccups along the way, such as how in the world do you grow that many plants? You'd have to get buy-in from more teachers, you know, to grow plants in their own classroom or outside and things like that. And so there are things that have to be worked out.
And support not only from the other teachers, I'm sure they're excited about you with this award, and you're probably spurring them on, but also administratively, making sure that it meets. Here you are, the plant guy, you know, the hort guy, but all of a sudden, how this all meets your curriculum and meets the standards. At the end of the day, that's what the administration, your Board of Education, your community is really looking for. So I think that would be a unique challenge for you. So. Well, with that, Denise, anything you'd like to add?
As I said, we're just very excited that we got to know Ryan, excuse me, a little bit. We were in the process, I was in the process of working with his principal when we had announced this award, and then he won his national award. And then, you know, COVID came to visit. And so I've not had a chance to get to Ryan's school and see him. So there'll be, you know, this ceremony today that will be on Facebook Live. It'll be posted. Hopefully, Ryan, you've received your national plaque. We do have a gift from Utah Agriculture in the Classroom. And as soon as we can safely visit, we're going to make a trip down to Saratoga Shores Elementary and see Ryan and meet his students and let them, I think it's very important that they celebrate with him. So I could have put that in the mail, but I'm not going to. I'm going to hang on to that. And when we get a chance, when he can celebrate with his students, we're going to have another party for Mr. Ferre. So
and that's the good news about that is 2020 might have started off a little rocky, but it's just going to keep going for you. So with that, Ryan, congratulations, and Denise, congratulations on a fine teacher that you've representing Utah Ag in the Classroom. So we'd really like to thank everyone for participating in today's recognition of our 2020 National Excellence in Teaching About Agriculture Award recipient, Ryan Ferre of Utah. He certainly does set a great example of how agriculture concepts are an exciting way to teach all students in all subject areas. So we hope you've learned something from today's recognition ceremony. It's the final. This was the final, saving the best for last. Ended up at Utah, and we've conducted these over the last couple of weeks. They've all been recorded and will be posted to the National Ag in the Classroom website at agclassroom.org. In the meantime, please join us starting at 9 a.m. Central on Wednesday, June 24th. That's 9 a.m. Eastern, sorry, that's 8 a.m. Central, that's 7 a.m. Mountain, that's 6 a.m. Pacific, for a phenomenal presenter. That's me. I get to go first. So I didn't even take 8 o'clock classes when I was in school. So, but we do start our virtual conference on Wednesday, June 24th. It will continue on Thursday, June 25th. There'll be 12 workshops, 6 on each day. You can see that information on our website at agclassroom.org. Once again, we'd really like to thank our sponsors of the National Excellence in Teaching About Agriculture Awards, the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute on Food and Agriculture, USDA NIFA, as well as our friends at Farm Credit for being the generous sponsors of our recognition and our Excellence Award winners. With that, on behalf of the National Ag in the Classroom organization, we'd really like to thank and congratulate all of our winners. They are all exemplary in what they've done and how they're reaching students about agriculture. You want more information about the Teacher Excellence Award winners? Contact your state contact or visit National Ag in the Classroom at agclassroom.org. With that, we hope that you have enjoyed this time, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Make sure you sign up for those virtual workshops at agclassroom.org, and we'll see you next week. Congratulations again, Ryan, and best wishes this fall.